This year, the Wellness Summit returns. 95% of the people you know out there want you to play it safe. They don't want you to jump over fire. You could get burned. They don't want you to live the life that you were born to live.
You've got to remember that if you're cooking food, you want to love it. You don't want to be thinking, oh, I don't want to have to prepare another meal for my husband who doesn't appreciate it. I don't have to prepare another meal for my wife who just doesn't care. She just wants peanut butter on toast.
Wake the heck up. You are where you're at right here, right now, because of all the choices you have made up to this point. Now, I didn't know what to do with being blown up. I didn't know what to do with that until the psychologist told me, you're going to have post-traumatic stress disorder, Karen. I went, okay, great. Now at least I know what to do with that.
Get ready, Melbourne. The summit is back. Where other people are just walking through fire.
I mean, look at it. And I'm on the phone going, yeah, and he's, I mean, look, like this. And then he's lifted up his top and he's squeezing that, and I'm going, yeah, I can. He goes, when are we masking?
There's something there that you want, that you haven't been doing for yourself.
Zazen Alkaline Water presents the 2018 Wellness Summit. Bigger and better than ever. All info and tickets at thewellnesssummit.com.
TheWellnessCouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives.
Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, featuring your hosts Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner.
Before we get started today, I'd love to introduce you to our new podcast sponsor, which is Fire Tonic. If you haven't heard of Fire Tonic before, it is a raw fermented apple cider vinegar that has a whole heap of other goodness in it, such as chilies, turmeric, garlic, horseradish, ginger, just to name a few, and it has this delicious, warming, spicy kind of aftertaste that just warms your stomach and your solar plexus and has you feeling amazing just by taking it. But aside from that, raw apple cider vinegar is immune boosting. It's antibacterial, antiviral. It will decongest whatever you are stuffed up in the head with. It's antioxidant and anti-inflammatory. It's also the best digestive booster. Apple cider vinegar is the same pH as our natural secretions and also stimulates those natural secretions. So if you're feeling a bit low in your digestive system, if you've got a bit of a sore throat or feel something coming on, it's great. I've used this before just to knock something on its head, like a sore throat or a virus that's gone through the rest of my family. And for me, I've just kept up with the Fire Tonic little shots, which I absolutely love anyway, because I love a bit of spice. And it really does just knock it on its head. So it is locally made here in Torquay, Victoria, in small batches from a really ancient gypsy recipe. And we are absolutely mad for it. So if you also need a bit of a boost this winter that you can take that is delicious, digestive and immune boosting, then please jump on to hillbilby, hillbilby.com.au and check them out. You can also use a special promo code for our tribe, which is Nourish, Nourish 10, in order to get 10% off your order, just to give it a go. Bridget and I use it. It's on our counter all the time. So head on over to hillbilby.com.au/discount/Nourish 10 to get your 10% off and start loving on some Fire Tonic.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And today's podcast comes from a listener request. In fact, I think it was within our tribe, wasn't it? That is parenting with your period. So in our tribe, we're having discussions at the moment around just the cyclical nature of women and really getting back in sync with our cycles and how that empowers other areas of our life. And of course, that sounds all fantastic when you are a woman standalone with no other responsibilities in terms of needing to give out to other people. But here we find ourselves with many little ones who can't theoretically look after themselves on their own, and we're forced to kind of work with those cycles in a different way. So that's the conversation we're having today. Before we jump into that, I'd love to remind you to jump on to nourishingthemother.com.au and sign up to join our tribe on the front page. Once a week, we will send you an email with links to everything we've put out in the world, and you can pick and choose. We'd love to dive deeper. We also pop in there what's happening for us in our week, which sometimes is fun, sometimes is deep. It's all sorts of different things, isn't it, Bridget?
Yeah, often juicy too.
So nourishingthemother.com.au, sign up just to stay in touch.
And I really love that this question came up because we can so easily forget in this very patriarchal sort of dominant culture that in fact we are deeply cyclical beings, and particularly women. And in fact, I was having this really interesting conversation with my son about the phases of the moon and about tides.
He's so into that, isn't he?
Well, he's just expanded this massive interest in crystals. So he's taking me on that journey too, because it's really nice. Yeah. We went shopping for crystals yesterday, but I digress. And I was really thinking about, in terms of phases of the moon and the tides and how they, are deeply connected. And in fact, we are too. Being, 80% water, and also women cycling in line with the moon often. And I thought, wow, like it's such a marvel of our biology and of the bigger cosmology that we find ourselves in. And yet so often we try to circumvent it or, rise above it. And I think often if we don't tune into that is when we really hit our hardest edges when it comes to the bleed, when it comes to, knowing that we're about to get our period, when it comes to ovulation. I think all of those points in our cycle call us back inward to find that connection, that reverence, that softness again.
I'm just so sitting with what you're saying, and it just speaks to my heart. It speaks to my womb. And I just feel that so deeply. Like as you're saying, I'm thinking, yes, theoretically we would all bleed on the full moon and we would all ovulate on the new moon, theoretically. And you will often find that that's the case with women who are not on any type of contraceptive, that they will naturally fall into that rhythm because, as you were saying, we are pulled by the magnetic nature of the moon. The moon is yin, right? The moon is the feminine.
I was quite excited when I got my period back and I started on the full moon.
Oh, that is exciting.
So I'm cycling
and no
moon.
Accident.
Yeah,
no
and I
accident.
think it's really quite nice because I can look at the phases of the moon actually at night and kind of connect into my body and know, okay, my period's on its way, it's really lovely.
That's exactly what it's supposed to be. So we talk about the phases and the cyclical nature of women being much like the season. So it's the embodiment of Mother Nature, right? The embodiment of the goddess, in that she, there's always a death every month. And this is the whole purpose of our period. The whole purpose of it is to bring us into a centered space in which, much like birth, we're in a transitional phase where we're closer psychologically, spiritually, and physically to other realms than what we would otherwise be. And because of that very nature, just by virtue of being woman and being in cycle, we have the capacity to open up intuitively parts of ourselves that we can't access at other parts of the month. And that's why we require physical stillness, is because there are other areas that are expanded when that slows down. No different to senses expand when one shuts off, right? It's the same kind of thing, only it's the sixth sense. And we're designed to witness this death and feel it in our bodies and deeply ask ourselves, what has worked and what hasn't in this last month? And what am I willing to let die and let be and move forwards, forging something new in this next month? And every month we have the capacity to die and rebirth. And that is phenomenal. Like, that is not something that any male or yogi can access. And you have that without any conscious nature. You have that by virtue of being a woman. It is a divine gift. Right?
And this is why I just love talking about this, because I think for so many women, unless you were handed this wisdom and this reverence through wise elders around you as a teenager or as a young girl, you wouldn't likely have any reverence for your cycle at all.
No, none. And it makes me so sad.
Me too.
I feel deeply kind of hurt when I feel that kind of that patriarchal kind of, oh, it's a nuisance and it's in the way and it's useless.
And let's get it out of the way because it doesn't let me get on with life kind of thing, which completely misses the wisdom in it.
Yeah, exactly. And when we're talking about our body is always speaking to us, that is none truer than in your cycle. So in your cycle, that's what I was talking about before, we have seasons. So we have the season of death or winter where we go deeply inwards and intuitive. and we have the season of spring when we're starting to emerge and blossom and think about those new things we're creating. And then we have the emergence of summer, that the full bloom, that blossom sexuality, that ready for ovulation and just that like, embodiment of everything that's blossomed. And then we have the descent as that starts to build and we start to slow down again, and we're called into PMS. What's working for us? What isn't? Because let me tell you, your inner she will roar at you through PMS if you've ignored her for spring and summer and possibly winter.
Which is why I think so much of that pain that some women find themselves continually hitting in PMS is that feedback, is that call inward. But yet we are so cultured to simply, you know, look at that pain as something to fix or something outside of ourselves or some problem, some condition. But so often it's your body speaking to you.
I absolutely believe it. And if you and I are both really looking at, we love to enter the body on a physical level, but what is happening? We are spiritual and etheric beings before we are physical beings. And what is happening in those layers, what is happening in our mind and in our beliefs and in our world that's filtering into a physical manifestation. And that's, you know, PMS, I'm really asking you to love your PMS as opposed to hating it like it's pain and it's your body working against you. It's still your body working for you. Your body is she's now yelling at you because you've missed the earlier whispers, and she's trying to show you a path through pain because you haven't noticed the subtler symptoms. She's trying to say, listen, be here, what's here? And all of those feelings and beliefs that come up when you're feeling that pain, when you're in that pain, when you're missing out on life and world, when you can't show up in the way that you want, it is all talking to you about what it is it's trying to get you to do. And that's not an it, right? This is your higher self trying to get you to say, this way, my darling, this way, listen, you know. And we're so cultured to not listen, to go, oh, well, I don't have time, I don't have space, that's ridiculous, I can't,
Think of all the reasons why it's not practical. And
yet your higher self is always asking you to come into alignment.
And you'll keep running into it, right? Like we keep running into whatever we're not willing to listen to.
Yeah. And as you know, Bridget, I mean, you've been on a path of an infertility journey that largely you've turned around by looking at that purely mental, spiritual practice, that we are not disconnected from that one feeds the other.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you feel about cycles and where you're at?
I have such a reference for it now, and like I look forward to getting my period. I look forward to creating space for it as opposed to resenting it. You know, as I wrote on social media yesterday, I think it was, or you know, whenever you're hearing this, but it was really about recognizing that my outer feelings, like, you know, I was in this, you know, kind of bit of resentment, bit of irritability. My outer feelings were there to call me inward, to call me to set the boundaries I needed, to call me to reorganize my day in a way that so that I could take the rest and take that, I think, room for my own inner winter to hibernate, you know. And so what that looks like in parenting is really stripping the day back. You know, like I'd been solo parenting for a couple of days and I was feeling a bit stretched, and so I really had to look at what were the things that I was saying that we should do or that we have to do, and were they really necessary, you know, so to really differentiate between what was authentically true and what I, you know, the outer world or the outer voices, outer demands were asking of me, to really look at ways that I could be both with my children and provide for them, but also provide for myself. So that was for us, you know, my son really wanted to go looking at crystals. So we went looking at crystals, which was super nourishing for me, you know, being in this stage of my cycle as well, because I got to really tune in on a sensory level and just be in that space of I don't know, there was just an immense amount of energy just in that process, and also watching him be so enlivened by this new interest that he's got, and like I feed off that.
It's a shared value.
Yeah. And then my daughter was just like running around the shop just like growling, like, because she was so excited at all these big crystals. So that was funny, you know. So looking at ways that we can get all of our needs met. And then,
but really what you're doing is sitting in your top values.
Yeah, sitting in my value of family and also expansion.
And health, right? You're still aligning the crystals with a sense of health.
Yeah. And like getting to touch them and talk about the, merit, the different principles behind the different ones, and getting my son to think about them and like why he's interested in that one. And also, when we come home, like trying to preempt some of their needs so that I could give them to them when I felt like I had the energy to, so I could then sit back and have a bit more of a rest when I knew that they were taken care of, and then put on a movie that we could all enjoy, and sometimes it might mean setting boundaries. Like, so Hugo was asking to listen to the Batman song because my kids are obsessed with Batman songs and Batman soundtrack. And I didn't feel in that moment that I was willing to listen to that. So I explained that. I said, look, I'm not willing to put that on. I know I've put on a lot, but I'm just not feeling up to it today, so we're not going to put it on today. And being really okay in that no. And then choosing something that I know that they could enjoy, that I would enjoy too, and that I would feel nourished by. So we watched Moana. And then, as soon as my husband came home from a golf trip, I said, look, I'm out. I'm going to have a rest. And I slept for 3 hours. And being unapologetic about that, knowing that that was what I needed to nourish myself and be able to put back in.
Would that have been different at another time in your life? Would you have felt guilt or have met those needs over your own?
I've generally been fairly aware of knowing my descent down into those symptoms. So I almost feeling like anemic when I was, having these headaches and just really wanting to retreat.
So even in that, it's giving you permission, because it's not even just a normal period. You've got a period with problems, which allows you to...
Well, it's an exit, right? So, and it's that whole thing, if you're not willing to do that without symptoms, then you'll get the symptoms to make you rest. And it was interesting because I'd woken up still feeling pretty yuck. But I thought, no, I'll be up for a little while and I'll get, help get dinner ready. And I was really playing with the thoughts and knowing that, thoughts become things, and what I'm thinking, I'm also creating the symptoms in my body as a result of that. And so I was playing with how I was thinking and what focus of my energy was on, and how I was feeling. And I could notice that when I was choosing to intentionally enjoy the process of getting the children to bed, as opposed to seeing it as an arduous task, I was actually finding I was beginning to feel better.
How did you flip that in your mind?
Seeing it as a really looking at it as a joy. So seeing it as a life-giving thing and a nourishing thing to give to them. So to really bring a sense of reverence and ritual around the dinner, bed and bathing, as opposed to seeing it as painful, and seeing that as health-giving, because I also really see our touch and our deep sense of seeing and listening to someone as actually a form of giving health and nourishment. So I was really focusing on that, and to my husband too. And that was to me really that whole idea of when you give somebody else what they would want in life, you get what you love in life. When you give love like that, you get that because of the process of the feeling of giving it. And so that was really nice, because then I got to still have an earlier night, but it wasn't that whole trying to drag myself over the finish line kind of feeling, which we can sometimes get stuck into.
Did you slow down in order to enjoy it?
Yeah, I did. I slowed down. So, and I did it in a way that, dinner was almost ready on the table before I had to get everyone there, so that I was able to almost preempt the need, which I think also helps us move more effortlessly through those steps in the evening, as opposed to feeling like you're chasing your tail.
What do you mean by that?
I think sometimes if you're looking at the clock and you're like, it's getting later, or it's, they're getting grumpy, or they're getting naggy, it can feel like you feel the tension rise. And so I was consciously prepared, preempting every stage, knowing, we've got this at this time and this at this time, and that helped me feel more able to give those things and everybody work a bit more harmoniously.
And during this parenting phase where you're still slowing down but bringing presence, and therefore I guess it's a sense of sensuality, isn't it, really? Because when we slow down, our sensuality expands and we really sense our world, and we get to feel our world. And that opens up gateways of joy.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, did you take moments of tuning into your womb? Were there cramps? Are you actually bringing also a sense of consciousness there?
I am. There's no cramps or anything like that. There's no sense in that way, but it's certainly being almost guided more from that space rather than the head space, if you know what I mean. So that connection, that check-in, as opposed to the to-do list running crazy in my head, it was almost more like embodied.
You're really working from a womb space as opposed to a head space.
Yeah.
Which is actually, I think it's genius advice for any mother in this phase, is to actually try and sink your consciousness into your womb. Let your hips lead the way in when you move, when you are facing towards an activity. Does it feel pleasurable in your hips, in your womb? Or is it, I should do that in my head, and to maybe be guided by that in your body as well.
And I think too, looking for the wisdom in those times where we might think, oh, I've got to do all this, or I should be doing that, and it's almost like when your kids are sick and you get that snuggliness from them. I really noticed how much my daughter was folding into me and wanting to be really just lounging around me, because I was almost giving her permission to do that, because I was doing that first for myself. And that's when I thought, gosh, we can so often look at our service in terms of doing things, but we don't recognize how much we are in service just by simply being, and the way that we be in our bodies and the way that we be in ourselves. And that when we do take time to slow down and be purposeful and lead from that womb space, that actually there's an incredible wisdom that imparts on those who are in our orbit.
Well, you pave the way. You show them, and you also make that okay.
Yeah.
And I'm also wondering, when you're saying, I need to go lie down and I need to do this for myself, is there any sort of resistance from your partner, or do you in your mind play out, oh, that's not okay for me to do, or he would feel weird about that? Or
No, there's not, but I'm thinking about why there's not. I think because sometimes I don't give myself permission to do that, and I think it would be because it's not okay, but usually that's just because I've made up that story in my own head. No one else thinks that. And he's often quite encouraging of going to go rest or go out and do blah, 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 or have this or have that, and it's often my own limitation.
How do you flip that limitation that's happening in your head? How do you recognise it's your stuff versus his stuff?
Ask where it's come from, and where have I got that belief from, and why am I stuck in this story? Because, there's a whole thing around anger that I'm working through with him at the moment. And it's the same thing. It's like I'm simply reading a situation based on the stories that I've stacked up, or that I've told myself, or I've been conditioned by. And my outer world is choosing to reflect that, or I'm choosing to perceive that in my outer world based on this story I've already got running. And so I'm, looking to break that. I'm constantly, finding the edge to that story, and almost in bringing in a pattern interrupt to it by having these conversations about, when you do this, I'm feeling like this. And he's like, well, that's not my intention. And, that kind of
So you
story.
actually get a check-in where he can actually, you're giving him the opportunity to bust that myth.
Yeah. Yeah, which is enormously empowering. But then it can also, I sometimes, depending on the mood that we're both in, it can feel a little bit scary, because you don't know what kind of territory you're stepping into if your partner also has a big trigger on it. But it's like, wow, when you get into that and you break it, break it open, you're like, oh my God, why have we all both been dancing around this for so long? Because it's just a thing with both of us projecting stuff onto that's not even real. And so I think we have the same opportunity to do that around our attitudes to rest and going inward and really creating space and making that okay.
Have you ever had to say to him, I really need this because it provides me with, or he has made those leaps?
He's made those leaps. I haven't really had to say that, but I can see situations, other situations, where it's definitely necessary to do that. Perhaps certainly for us, there's a lot of conversation happening about having a third child and what that would look like, and how we would like that birth to look like. And that's an edge, right? That's an edge of having those conversations about what him doing X would provide me with. So there's certainly areas where I've got that now and don't need to articulate what it would provide me with. And then there's areas where it's a new area of growth for us in a relationship, and those tools are needed.
How do you sit in your body when you're needing to have those conversations that's a new area of growth as opposed to one that you've already bust and there's a level of comfort there?
Yeah. Really trying to ground into my body as opposed to be in the headspace of thinking and projecting forward and running a story.
Is that breath for you?
Breath and opening up my chest. And
opening up the heart
yes,
space.
And really making myself and my sovereignty and sense of desire for an outcome okay, and not frivolous or not unreasonable or whatever other story we might come up about what it is we truly want.
That it's safe for you to express your needs,
yeah.
Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
And that your needs are worthy. Do you have to do work on making your needs worthy?
Yeah, I think so.
How do you do that?
A lot of practice in terms of asking myself what I really want and where the stories come in around, but you can't have that because of this, or but that means you're blah, 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 or that means you can't have that if you do this. Looking at all those limiting beliefs one by one and starting to go, where's that come from? And why don't I think I can do those two things? And why do I think that this is going to take away from that? And that's interesting, because it's not a truth, it's just a belief I have. So I'm looking at them one by one and pulling them apart to start to unhinge my attachment to a story or an outcome.
Would you recommend doing that on paper, or do you think it's enough to do it in your head?
I think it's good to do it on paper. I do a bit of it in my head, but when it's a big one, on paper is wiser.
Why do you think that?
Because I think it's a real practice of putting something on paper. There's like a psychological next level to that, that really gets it out of your head and into more of a manifestation and intention that you're desiring to change something or work through something that you don't quite get when you're doing it in your head.
So what advice do you have for how you honour your cycle as a mother?
I do lots. I love baths. And baths, for me, I tend to do like an Epsom salt bath and like a lavender bath or something like that with candles around the time of ovulation, because I can feel myself really being pulled into my womb. And that to me is a really nice process to say, you know,
when it comes to our sexuality, we want to look at the beliefs and the meanings that we've picked up as much as the ones that we've made up about our experiences.
In our Loathing to Loving program, we look at relationships to our family, partner, children, and feminine self, and spend a module in Nourish and Nurture, deeply expanding that feminine wisdom. Our Sensuality and Sexuality course is the next dive, exclusive to those who've taken part in the Loathing to Loving program.
The reason for that is the theory and the tools that you gain from Loathing to Loving underpin the knowledge of the psychosexual story that we build upon in our Sensual Sexual Deep Dive. For $289, you can join us in our exclusive Sensuality Sexuality course, or 3 payments of $97. We really want to walk you through loving your sexuality more than your sex life.
To find out more and join us, go to nourishingthemother.com.au/online programs. And also really honour what it's already created for me in my life, right?
And creation beyond life.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so creation in any form. And I think that the way that baths are so powerful, because, you know, water is such a big body of energy and we are so attuned to water, I think, as women, the way that it keeps us in that, like in a bath, there's no distractions. Like you can't be anywhere else but there and be anywhere else but in your body. And I really love that. So that's something that I always like to do. And I also try to get quite, you know, bring in sensuality practices, you know, because my daughter's right into like putting creams on, you know, so we will do that together. And I'm really looking for invitations that my children give me, because often that's a, you know, guidepost to what you need or whatever they're bringing to you. So looking for invitations that they provide to be more playful or slow down or just soak up that sensual nature of ourselves that can sometimes be thrown by the wayside when we're busy.
And what about boundaries? So if your kids are really asking for perhaps boisterous play when you're feeling very insular, what do you think about that?
I think it's really good to honour those. And what I'm finding more and more is that when we say yes, but we really mean no, it's a really confusing message, particularly when children are so attuned and they're so aware and they know that our bodies might be saying one thing, but our voice is saying something else. So I am really looking to expand that level of congruency that I have within myself. And I think our cycle deeply calls us there. You know, it's like if we keep saying yes and we mean no, it's around the time of your period that it's just going to be a flat out no, you know, because that's going to be the time where you have all your defenses are down. And if you haven't honoured those boundaries throughout the rest of the month, then you're going to basically honour them at all costs at that time of the month. And I think it's...
Because it's also culturally acceptable to lose your shit in your PMS time.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It is. But wouldn't it be, you know, amazing to not have to get to that point, right? I mean, sure, it's fine if you do, but you know, really honouring our cycle at every stage means that we're constantly having that check-in with ourselves about what is okay and what's not okay with us. And I have no problem with boundaries, especially when we can give them in a way that's loving, you know, and isn't making our child the problem or what they're asking for the problem, but simply talking about, I can't provide that right now because, you know, but I can do blah, 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 or here, how about you do this because right now I need to do this, you know, and being authentic in that.
I love that so much.
I think you are excellent at that.
Yeah, look, but I still need reminders of it. You know, I still feel myself. It's a really strong desire, which you and I talk about regularly because we have a story on not being that, right? We have a story on being in service in whatever form that took, irrespective of our own internal needs. And so, you know, it's part of our whole conscious parenting path. But I fall off the wagon. And I end up doing it and then going, oh, why did I do that? Or why did I say that? Or that wasn't honouring. Or, wow, that didn't go well.
Yeah. And I wonder why that didn't
wonder why that was. No, I think it's a conversation that just by virtue of being women in this culture and then on top of that by being women who are mothers in service, I think it's a conversation we need to continuously have is what are boundaries and what is a loving way to put boundaries in place, because it doesn't need to be fire and brimstone.
No.
And it doesn't need to be fire or ice in terms of, you know, we're cool or we're like red hot. You know, you don't need to be the Ferrari that goes from 0 to 100 if you're willing to put in place loving boundaries with yourself first. I was thinking about this the other day, actually. I was shopping with my niece. It was her birthday. And it was all of the women in my family and we were shopping for her. And I noticed that she could not find her authentic voice in what she liked. And I'm really big on fashion. And my sister is ultra gorgeous, ultra fashionable. You know, I've always felt uncool next to her. And yet I realise part of my whole journey of a woman is realising that fashion is not what the culture dictates.
Yeah.
Fashion for me is an embodiment and an adornment practice of the feminine that has been used since the time of the goddesses. That it's an expression of our internal self that we allow to flow outwards, that people get to witness and experience a slice of us.
Beyond a trend.
Beyond a trend. It's a sense of self. And I'm really like strong in that now, and particularly with my daughters. And I was witnessing this with my niece, and she'd pick something up that, fair enough, was a bit hideous. But my sister would be like, pull a face, or she'd be like, oh, no, you know, da-da. And at one point I turned around and went, you might have to give her a chance to find her own sense of style. You might need to pull back a little.
Yeah.
And she didn't give me anything. She just walked off. And I went, okay. And then I could see then my niece was getting super, super flustered. And she's like, oh, we can just shop another day, you know. And there was no other day. Like, this was it, right? And I just got down to her level and I just said to her, Belle, do you know what it feels like in your body when something feels really honouring and really good for you and when it doesn't? Because I'm not sure that that's a particularly strong message for her. And she kind of just looked at me a bit vague, and I said, okay, well, when we put something on that we really authentically, deeply and truly love because it expresses part of us, our whole body kind of lifts up, and I kind of opened my body. So we're kind of like a blossoming flower. We blossom open and we want everybody to see our blossom because it's so big and beautiful and open. And when we put on something that we really don't like, that someone else says looks good or someone else says that's what you should wear, we kind of close in like a cave and we feel our whole energy go kind of grey and we kind of like this. So we're going to practice right here, right now in this shop in front of this mirror. We're going to practice. I know you don't want to put things on and off, but we're going to grab like about 8 things and we're going to practice in the mirror. And she's looking at me. I could see my mum and sister sitting back going, you know. And so she would put something on and I'd stand behind her in the mirror and say, now listen to your body. Does your body go like this? Does it blossom open? Or does it go like this? Does it cave in? And she went, caves in. I went, take it off. Done. We don't need it. Next one. Put it on. What does your body say? Is it going open or is it going closed? No, it goes open like this.
Oh, gorgeous.
Great. Let's put that in the maybe pile. Next one. And we went through it, and by the end of it, she was like, yes. And I thought the item she chose would be something my sister would hate.
Yeah.
But that's not the purpose of the experience. The purpose of the experience is for her to find her authentic voice, not for it to be what someone else says is okay.
Yeah.
And that is a powerful message.
It's so powerful because, and this is the thing, like for all of us, right? Like we are assaulted by messages about all of the things that we should be, you know, and by all of the, you know, things that are right, things that are wrong. And this is the gift that we can give our daughters and our children when we can deeply help them stay connected because they know.
Yes.
They know.
And that's what that's what I was reminded of as you were talking about really deeply sitting in this authentic space of really owning what is honouring to you, because that is something that they consciously and unconsciously will learn from us. And none is that greater than in our cyclical nature. And I love that, you know, the sentences and the way this is how we express it and this is how we move with it, and showing them a way in which you can still be in a world but be in yourself at the same time, rather than it needing to be either or. There's a way to meld both. And sometimes you're going to hit edges where you go, oh, that didn't work. But that's just a calling to go, what would I do differently next time? And you're never going to nail it, right? We are cyclical. Our journey is never tick, done, off we go, next thing. Tick, done, off we go, next thing. We're not on this linear path where it all just kind of, once we've learned a lesson, we just keep rocking on that, you know, upwards journey. That's not how it works.
And so, you know, we're process beings. We're not product beings.
That's exactly right. And so I think there's going to be a lot of weaving with our cycle, but if we're willing to take that movement on, I think what we find is a more embodied and alive sense of self. And I think ultimately that is what every woman is seeking, is her aliveness. And it is in your cycle, but it requires raw honesty and vulnerability to get to the aliveness, because the deadness is the parts of you that are slowly wilting the more you ignore them.
I love that.
That's what I think.
What would you say about, you know, in your own experience, parenting on your cycle or in your cycle?
Well, I feel a bit weird about it at the moment, I suppose, because not weird, but not, I guess, as clearly an authority right now, because I've been absent from a period for so long because I was pregnant and then I still haven't got my period back from breastfeeding, and my daughter's nearly 9 months old. So, you know, that's a year and a half of not having a period. So it feels like a long time ago. But what I can tell you is that I also love getting my period, and I've loved it for years. And as best as I can, I plan my month around loving my period. So I know, and I've spoken to you about this, Bridge, or I've thrown it out there, that there is a capacity when you, particularly when you work for yourself, but even when you don't, there's a way to kind of structure your diary that you're putting all of the out there social creative things in that spring and summer phase of your cycle, and you're putting all of the what worked, what didn't, what are we going to change, what don't I like, going deeper stuff in the autumn and winter phase of your cycle. So I was saying to you, particularly you who has to be out there in the world with your movies, what if you could do a movie on ovulation every month? Like that would be like freaking amazing. Yeah. And you've got the build up to the movie and all wanting to be out in the world and seen and flourish. And then you've got the winter where you can come back down and into yourself again. Like I just think there's rhythm that we can find. So as much as possible, I try to honour my seasons in my month, but also in my day. And I'm really, every time something shifts with my kids and they or I kind of hit a new level, I'm having to redo that. And so I'm having that conversation with my husband now my daily season has changed right now. So my baby is more high needs than what she was. And I've still got to fit in work and I want to fit in more body practice right now. So my seasons have changed and now I've got to reconfigure my day. So I know that if I want to be really creative with work, I have to do that in my day when I've got a really, like, first thing in the morning for me is like creative genius time. That's my spring and summer. So if I want to be creative with work, that's my time to do it. And if I want to rest, the middle of the day is kind of my time to do that. So I'm trying to get out of sync with that because when my daughter's sleeping, I'm trying to like smack out work because it's the only child-free time. But it's not working for me because I'm not creative. I'm not productive. Because what my body's asking, I'm wanting to rest. Because I'm go, like every other capacity, I'm like hanging for this time when I get work done. And it's not working. It used to work, but now it's not. My season has changed.
Yeah. And sometimes even acknowledging that can be hard because we can get so stuck in the way that we want it to be or the way that we're used to it being, because it's that whole idea of holding on to what we know versus what we don't.
Yeah, and I'm facing beliefs of, is it okay for me to be at home doing, in inverted commas, nothing when I could be doing something? Like, is that okay? You know, because I hit all of my edges around not being a provider and my husband's at work and I'm here watching a movie. Is that okay? You know, like I'm hitting all these, and so I'm having to have these, I'm making myself grow up and have these conversations. And I'm like, I'm really sitting with, I really need and want to rest, but I'm feeling really, it's too self-indulgent. You know, like I'm really trying to bring the shadow out. Because when you bring it out, it doesn't need to be so scary and running you. So my advice is I love everything we've talked about, and I love my cyclical nature because I think it makes me more wild. And I think we need more wild women in this world.
Yes, we do.
Not women that toe the line and say, I will self-sacrifice till I'm grey. Women that say, raw, you know, this is me. Yeah. And this is when I'm out in the world and this is what I want for me. Because the more I see that, the more I do it for myself.
And I think also being unapologetic at what you, because we're not one kind of being, right? So sometimes we're going to be quiet or reserved or, you know, dare I say, rude, right? And and other times we're going to be overly jazzed, and all of that's okay.
Yeah,
you know, like, because that's also part of our cyclical nature.
Totally. I was totally thinking about that too, because I've been thinking a lot this week actually about that podcast that we did on the courage to be disliked, and I still think there's so much power in that. Just this sense of owning that, do I want to be the nice, pleasing girl for everybody? There's part of me that wants that because it's safer and it's easier not to rock the boat.
Yeah.
But there's this other part of me that wants to roar and just go, you want to call me a bitch? You're right. I am a bitch.
Yeah. And fuck this shit.
Yeah. And here's why that's awesome for me.
Yeah.
And
I think too, though, the more you try to be nice and kind, the more you got your inner bitch is going to explode. You know, like, this is the thing. Like, we're multifaceted beings, and we are all sides. And, you know, those times when we roar, you know, that's really needed sometimes. But making that okay can be difficult. Being disliked can be painful. I need to go and listen to that after my last event.
Do you want to speak about that at all?
Yeah, look, you know, I really went out on a limb and held an event on perhaps the most polarizing topic of our time, which is vaccination. And, you know, so many times I was like, gosh, can I do this? Am I going to get shut down? Is this even going to go ahead? Who am I to have this conversation? And is it safe to do it? Am I going to be supported in doing it? And in the end, once I recognized that I had all of the appropriate things in place that I could possibly put in place, we can't control everything, I really had to put install the belief that this was safe. Really had to work on my own beliefs that were coming up around it not being safe, or because I could feel like visceral reactions in my body when I'd get an email that was a bit angry, or a comment that someone had made, or just attacks. Right,
because when you put yourself out there, the more influence you have, the more haters.
Yeah, exactly. Get, right? And I was constantly reminding myself of that. Right, like the more authentic you become, the more people you're going to piss off.
Because you're no longer everybody's cup of tea.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And so I did so much inner work through the probably 2-3 months leading up to it, that by the time we got to the event, like it was just, I couldn't have hoped that it would go any better. And of course it got heated.
So amazing.
But I was expecting that, and the Suburban Sandcastles is all about eliminating the issues of our time and challenging often the status quo, and that can be really uncomfortable. But we are also about doing that in a respectful way and being willing to open our minds on whichever way we look at an issue. And so it was really true to that ethos, which I'm super grateful for, because I'm grateful to myself in pulling it together, but I'm also grateful for the community that came together on it, wherever they sat on the debate, because everybody was able to be there and present to the conversation and contribute in their own way and respect each other. So, yeah, like it took a lot of courage to be disliked around it, but I think we all need to step outside what we think is okay if the whispers within us are calling us to that place. And like I couldn't escape this. Like I was taken to that topic. I couldn't escape it. And in reality, I probably knew that 3 years ago that I was going to have to tackle some of the big stuff when I started Suburban Sandcastles. So yeah, I mean, like I feel like the only way is up.
And here you have a roaring period.
Yeah, which is so interesting because that came about 2 days later, and it was a couple of days early for the month.
There's no mistakes though, right?
No.
How much is that just eliminating that raw, that charge,
totally.
that anger, that everything that you've built up? Exactly.
Yeah.
Because a period is not just a physical, shedding of a lining.
Yeah.
It's literally,
so much more.
it's a cleanse. It cleanses every part of you if you allow it to really move into that. And how honouring is that, that you are obviously still so in touch with your body that it's even doing that for you. I've got all this stuff and I need to let it go. So here we go. I mean, it's so powerful.
It is, isn't it? I love that you've made that link too, and that you linked it to anger almost, like that whatever unexpressed anger I was holding on to, I've actually physically
and even fear, right? It's still a body movement, and blood is just a heat, and how much heat was in your head, and how much you just expelling through your body. Like it's just even the fact that you said you felt anemic. I mean, that's just that real yin, right? So you've had all this yang energy that you're now moving out of your body to come back into your yin. Like it's just the more I just think how honouring is our body.
Yeah.
Even when you can sit there and go, oh, gee, it's been, really hard and it's the worst period I've ever had and blah, blah, blah. Like you could do it that.
Yeah.
Or you could look at how your body is still working for you rather than against you.
And giving me a gift, right? Like giving me permission.
So beautiful.
Yeah.
So, Bridgie, how do we connect with you?
Suburbansandcastles.com.
Do you know your next movie?
We've got, I'm so excited. So in Geelong and Melbourne, we've got the Goddess Project.
I'm so excited about that too.
So it's all about, just the different ways women are showing up in the world today and to really honour this rise in feminine consciousness, which is so much about what we're talking about in this podcast, really.
Totally.
And also Super Sapiens, which is the rise of the mind. So it's looking at not only, this idea of consciousness hacking in a technological way, like through artificial intelligence and virtual reality, but really looking at, like what we do with Loathing to Loving, like how can we hack our own beliefs? How can we hack our own evolution of self, through tools that access this mind-body connection? So I've got a fabulous kinesiologist coming to talk about that and to really talk about this concept of, we're so much more than who we think we are, in essence. So
that sounds amazing too.
Yeah, 2 really cool ones. And to connect with you, Jules?
Is thepleasurenutritionist.com. And to connect with us is nourishingthemother.com.au, Nourishing the Mother on Facebook and Instagram. We do love that you listen, and we do love that you comment and you message us when you have breakthroughs or something really spoke to you. It just makes us go, yes, we just love that we're creating this tribe, and there's these women with these ripples in their lives that otherwise we'd know nothing about. And it's really brings the reverence for us, doesn't it?
It does.
So remember, you have to nourish the mother to rock the family, and none is more true than when we're talking about our cycles. And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
This year, the Wellness Summit returns.
I realised in this time that I couldn't keep waiting for love from other people. I couldn't keep expecting love from other sources. But I had to give that to myself.
Yanni says, I don't care if everyone says that the kitchen is the woman's world. He says, I'm going to prepare food. I love my own cheese. I love my own wine. I don't care what you think of my new flat screen TV. He just loves company.
I started asking myself more often, what do I want? Such a simple question, isn't it? But when you think that, and I'm sure all of you sitting there, when you think that, something springs into your mind. And there's something there that you want that you haven't been doing for yourself.
Brett Hill and Marcus Pearce feature at the 2018 Wellness Summit. Bigger and better than ever. Tickets on sale Friday, May 4 at thewellnesssummit.com.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives.
Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.